welcome to quarantine lesson number one. All right. So we're going to start with the Middle East, also known as Southwest Asia. We're going to go pretty slow in this unit with this new schedule with the virus going around. Working from home, so this will be like the Middle East light for the most part. All right, so here's some basic questions that we should be able to answer when we get to the end of this unit, talking about the Middle East. First kind of question would be, should the West, which is European countries, the United States, attempt to democratize the Middle East and other Islamic areas? Meaning, should we try to bring democracy to the region and try to get people to switch to democracy, or almost like force them to switch to democracy? The idea is that creates more stability in the Middle East if the people have a voice, which would give them a reason not to turn to terrorism and things like that to get their voices heard. Next one is, what role does religion play in politics in the Middle East and other Islamic areas? It plays a huge role. So a lot of the Muslim countries like Iran, they use the laws of Islam and enforce them in society. For example, let's say um, a married couple, one of them cheats on the other one, and so they have an affair. Here in the United States, you probably get a divorce and probably a punch in the face. But in the Middle East, it can be far worse. If the woman commits adultery, she might be killed for it. And so they're much more strict there when it comes to those kind of rules, or maybe just arrested and put in jail for a while. All right, and then pressures for and against democracy in the Middle East and other Islamic areas. Basically, they don't have a lot of freedom. They definitely don't have religious freedom, and they have harsh dictators. And so those are going to be the pressures for democracy. But of course, at the same time, you have to think about what would happen to people if they rose up against their governments. You know, that obviously they could be killed, they could be arrested, because those governments have such power. And then the next big question is, does the United States have the right to remove a government and impose democracy in a region? So can we go into the Middle East, take out a tyrannical government, and be like, boom, you're going to have a democracy, and this is how it's going to work? Which honestly, it sounds kind of funny because it's like we're forcing someone to be democratic. And the whole point of democracy is that people have a choice and a voice. But at first, we're like going in saying, this is what you're going to do, and this is how it's going to work. Which that doesn't sound like democracy. All right, people that think we should be able to go in there, remove our government, impose democracy, they say the region has horrible human rights records, a connection to terrorism, groups like ISIS and Al Qaeda. That if we created a model democracy in the Middle East, that other countries would follow. And we've kind of seen that back in 2011. There was an event called the Arab Spring, which you'll need to know what that is. The Arab Spring in 2011 was a series of revolutions that occurred there. There were 15 revolutions in North Africa and the Middle East in 2011. And all of them were pro-democracy. So that was a big event there. So we did kind of see that. We could remove our troops from the Middle East if there was peace and stability there, and then oil prices could drop dramatically, making gas much more affordable. People that say no, that we shouldn't do that, they say that actually it would cause them to hate us even more, that more hatred would be spewed at Europe and the United States, which would actually encourage more people to become terrorists. And would see more terrorist attacks because of the anger there. Also, they talk about the clash of modernity versus traditionalism. Modernity is the modern era. So basically, the younger generation in the Middle East and North Africa, they're starting to become more Europeanized and more American looking, and so they dress more European. Their attitude is more European. And that clashes with traditional culture, the traditional dress of Muslims, the traditional role of women within the Muslim system, and stuff like that. They do not go well together. And so you see families being split apart because of the split in culture. All right, so those are the kind of big ideas we're going to hit in this unit. So let's just get into the basics now. So again, Southwest Asia, same thing as the Middle East, same region. So here we're looking at the countries of like Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, Iraq, Kuwait, Iran, United Arab Emirates, Oman, Yemen. And then also we'll include North Africa with this. So we'll talk about Egypt and stuff like that. And all gets thrown in there together, as you can see here. So the reason why we talk also about North Africa with the Middle East is because they have a lot of...
Get my breakfast.
Okay, you go do that, Julian. All right, so basically they have several things in common. First is they're pretty much mostly Muslim throughout the entire region. You have a strong Arab culture that connects them together, and the physical geography is similar. North Africa is in the Sahara Desert, it's a lot of desert, and then the Middle East is a lot of desert. So their cultures are going to be similar because of their physical geography. But anyways, these also tie together because back, 1,000 years ago, they were all under the Islamic Empire, which is going to bring in that similar language and religion. All right, and then Southwest Asia is also known as the cultural crossroads of planet Earth. So when you look at it on a map here, for example, you can see like every region of the world goes through the Middle East, especially back in the Middle Ages and before, going back to ancient times. The Silk Roads went right through the Middle East. And so any idea from China or India is going to go through the Middle East. Ideas from North Africa went to the Middle East. From Sub-Saharan Africa went through the Middle East. Ideas from Europe would go through the Middle East on over to East Asia and South Asia. Ideas between like Russia and the Middle East would pass through there. So if the Earth had a four-way stop intersection, like a main four-way stop intersection, like in a small town, this is the four-way stop. Everything crosses here. So you're getting ideas from everywhere. And that also means that their culture is going to spread everywhere. You see elements of Middle Eastern culture in every region on Earth because of this cultural crossroads. This is also how religions spread. This is how Islam has spread. This is how Christianity spread, starting in the Middle East and then spreading throughout the world because of this cultural convergence. All right, so quick contributions they've made throughout history. It's kind of a lot. They're kind of a big deal. So they were the first ones to farm. So they were the first ones to domesticate plants and animals. That's huge because that means civilization started there. That means the whole idea of what a civilization is and what culture is started in the Middle East. They were also really advanced in medicine. They were the first ones to learn how to create stitches for people using animal guts. So they would use that to create stitches. Also, the first ones to create antiseptics to prevent infections. They were the first ones to realize how the eyeball worked and develop glasses like what I'm wearing right now. They were created by Muslims 1,000 years ago. First pharmacy ever was actually in Baghdad, current day Iraq, in the year 800 AD. And so that's 1,200 years ago. I mean, Baghdad, for example, during the Middle Ages was like one of the most advanced cities in the world. If you wanted to be anything, do anything, advance yourself, you went to Baghdad. So the exact opposite of today. Also, they were the first ones to develop hospitals. They were the first ones to license physicians, which means a physician could lose their license if they messed up like during a surgery or something like that. So the idea of malpractice basically within the medical field. They were the first ones to actually use music as a way of therapy, knowing that music could help people feel better and actually heal quicker as well. And there's actually a funny story with that. They did a study one time where they had two different plants. It was the same type of plant, but they had two of them. One of them, they played nice music, like uplifting music to it. The other one, they played like heavy metal, hard rock, like I hate myself, like kind of music. And the plant that had the positive music, that plant actually grew and became stronger and healthier. And then the plant that heard the really bad music that was really negative and screaming, that music actually caused the plant to die a lot quicker. It like got negative. It's like maybe I really am a bad plant, and so it actually hurt the plant. And they discovered the basic idea of this, 1,000 years ago. And then they came up, the first ones to come up with the idea of something being psychosomatic, which means it's all in your head. So, for example, some people, and this happens still today, where like maybe they're really afraid of speaking in public, and they will actually lose the ability to talk. And they'll wake up and they're like, I can't talk. They're thinking that, obviously, because if they can't talk, they can't say it. But they're like trying to move their mouth and they can't talk, and they really think they can't talk. And in reality, there's nothing wrong with them. It's just that fear is causing them to shut down their ability to talk. The brain is literally protecting them from having to talk. That is psychosomatic. So that means that you're not actually sick. There's nothing actually wrong with you. It's just all in your head and stuff like that. So they were super advanced in that region. You don't have to have all this memorized, by the way, like on this slide. For example, this is just giving you an idea of how advanced their culture was. Because this is going to play a big role today. Because today, one of the reasons that there's a lot of people upset in the Middle East is because they know that their civilization was once the most advanced civilization on Earth. And now they're really far behind. So, for example, instruments they developed. They came up with the tambourine, flute, oboe, clarinet, trumpet, reed instruments, and bagpipes. So it wasn't the Scottish. It was people in the Middle East, the Arabs. Arabs also developed the idea of zero. which in math that made huge advancements because no one really came up with the idea of zero beforehand. Because when you think about it, like, why would you have a symbol that represents nothing? Like, how can you have something that represents the idea of nothing? And so that actually took a while in mathematics. So with that, they developed algebra and trigonometry. So I know that you love the fact that you get to take algebra class now because of its discovery. But if it makes you feel better, we wouldn't have the technology we have today without algebra. Then the Egyptians, they invented all sorts of things: candy, checkers, bowling, beds, chairs, mirrors, glass, eyeliner, lipstick, nail polish, eyeshadow, perfumes, powders, hair dyes, body lotions, oil, wigs, beauty shops, and men work makeup because you got to look good when you're working on the pyramid. So the Egyptians, for example, we can tell they cared a lot. we can tell that they cared a lot about the way they looked, about outward beauty and stuff like that. And then the idea of absolute location. So they used the stars to see where they were and chart where they were. That came from religion because Muslims always pray towards Mecca, and they need to know which direction Mecca is in order to face that direction when they pray 5 times a day. All right, other historical contributions. There's even more. They developed the astrolabe. So that you pointed at the North Star. It helps you see where you are, how far north or south of the equator, how many degrees you've moved. That's what allowed Europeans to explore and actually make it to the Americas. So without the Muslim empires, Europeans would have made it over here. They invented the wheel. They invented money. So again, the beginning of civilization. Written history starts with them. Damascus, which is still around today in Syria, even though it's been heavily bombed, is the oldest continuously inhabited city. People have been living in that city for 4,000 years straight now. So they have a long, deep history. And then, of course, in religion, quite a bit. And then the Tigris and Euphrates River also runs through Iraq, and that's where we get our first cities as well. So I already mentioned the Middle East being the cultural crossroads of everything. It's also the beginning of the 3 main monotheistic religions. So Judaism being the first one, starting with Abraham, and then, of course, you got people like Moses and David and Solomon and stuff like that. And then out of Judaism comes Christianity with Jesus. So that starts as well in Israel, and then will spread throughout the world. And then 600 years after Christianity is Islam, starting with Muhammad in Saudi Arabia. So all started there as well. So again, all these are Abrahamic religions. We talked about how Muslims also see themselves coming from Abraham. So if you may remember back near the beginning of the year when I wrote Abraham up on the board, and we talked about how God makes promises called covenants. And the covenant with Abraham was the idea that Abraham's descendants would have land, seed, and blessing. And so we talked about how his wife, Abraham's wife, Sarah, was supposed to have a baby. They tried for many years. She didn't get pregnant. And so he instead met up with Hagar and then had Ishmael. And then God still blesses Ishmael, but Ishmael is going to be a father of a different group of people. It's going to be the Arabs. And then later on, Abraham and Sarah will have Isaac. And so Jews and Christians believe that God's promise came through Isaac, passing all the way down directly to Jesus. Whereas then Muslims believe that promise went to Ishmael, not Isaac, and went to the present day Arabs. But they do share common stories, like they do all share the same story of creation. And actually, we can pinpoint it on the map in the Middle East as far as the Garden of Eden. So in the book of Genesis, it says a river watering the garden flowed from Eden, and from there it divided, had 4 head streams. The name of the first is the Pishon. It winds to the entire land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. Aromatic resin, onyx are also there. The name of the second river is the Gihon. It winds to the entire land of Cush. The name of the third river is the Tigris. It runs along the east side of Assur, and the fourth river is the Euphrates. So putting that together, your first cities on earth are right here: Urdu, Ubaid, Uruk. And you follow it down. Garden of Eden, according to that, would be right there, which is underneath the Persian Gulf currently. Back in the day, though, Persian Gulf, the banks of it were right there. And so for Jews, Christians, and Muslims, they would all go around this area to see where they believe the Garden of Eden would have been located. All right. Things you need to know, basic things. The Arabian Peninsula. So that area is the Arabian Peninsula. Saudi Arabia is the main country there. I got the Ruba Kali Desert there in the middle. Syrian Desert up to the north. Guess where that is? It's in Syria. So that one's easy. The Anatolian Peninsula, that's Turkey. It's called that because the Roman Empire, that region was called Anatolia. Then we got some mountains. Got the Zagros Mountains between Iraq and Iran. Be careful if you ever go hiking there, which I doubt you will unless you're like in the military. But there was two Americans hiking there a couple of years ago, and they got arrested by the Iranians, and the Iranians claimed that they were spies. They weren't. They were just idiot Americans on the wrong side of the border. All right, and then Tigris and Euphrates River runs right through Iraq into the Persian Gulf. Jordan River, that runs through Israel. Religiously speaking, that's a very important river for the Jews. That's where Joshua crossed over to get into the Promised Land and fought Jericho. For Christians, that's where Jesus was baptized, was in the Jordan River. Jordan River flows into the Dead Sea. Dead Sea is the lowest point on Earth. It's over 1,000 feet below sea level. That's the sea where it's so salty, nothing lives in it. That's why it's called the Dead Sea. Really straightforward there. Also, it's the one you can literally just sit in the water and you float because it's so salty. But, of course, if you have a cut on you or anything, you cannot get in it because it will burn like crazy. All right, and then the Suez Canal, that was built, well, the British had the Egyptians build it. That connects the Mediterranean to the Red Sea. So you got the Med, the Red, and the Dead. So Mediterranean Sea, Red Sea, and the Dead Sea. So the Med connects to the Red through the Suez Canal. This way, Europeans didn't have to go all the way around Africa and come back up to get to India. They could just cut through the Mediterranean, cut through Egypt, get to the Red Sea, wave to Moses, and then just keep going on as they go. All right, and then the Persian Gulf is over here. This is a strategic waterway that we try to control with our Navy. All right, as far as looking at human-environment interaction, so how do people survive in this region? You're in a desert, so what do you think you need? You need water, because you're in a desert. So to get water in a desert, there's a couple of things you can do. First big thing is create a lot of dams. Dam up rivers as much as you can. So you can create reservoirs, and then you got to irrigate so you can grow crops there because you can't grow a crop if it's not raining. So you have to be able to irrigate. Their form of irrigation is called drip irrigation. So this is like hoses that have little holes in them, and you send the water down there. And it drips next to the crops. Because think about it, if it's 130 degrees outside, you don't want a water sprinkler shooting water out because a lot of it's going to evaporate before it hits the ground. And then as soon as it hits the ground, it's going to burn away. So you want to be able to get water to the root systems as quickly as possible. And, of course, it conserves water. You're not wasting water because you can't waste water in the desert. And then desalinization. This is taking ocean water, taking the salt out of it, and then purifying it. They don't use this for drinking because it's too expensive. This process is really expensive and time-consuming. But they do use this for what we call gray water. That term means like the water that we use in our sewage systems. The water that's in your toilet, for example, that would be termed gray water. So it's clean, and we got to get the salt out because if we left the saltiness in the water, it would erode our sewage pipes. And they would have to be repaired very often. So you still have to get the salt out to be able to use it for that. All right, and then, of course, their big product is oil. That's the main thing they make a lot of money off of. Problem with oil is that it is a resource that we can definitely run out of. It's non-renewable. Once we're out of oil, we're done. And we have about 45 years left until we were out of oil. As far as what we currently know is out there. Oil, of course, is used for gasoline. Everything that's plastic is made from oil. They have the most reserves out of anyone in the world. So anyways, they pump out the crude oil, and then they take it to a refinery in order to turn it into things like gasoline and stuff like that. So that's why we have such a close relationship with countries in the Middle East, is because we need their oil for the most part. Our country does not run without oil. And like I said, refineries, that's where they actually convert it over to products we can use, like gas. All right, and then geographical regions real quick. So this area right here is known as the Fertile Crescent. You may have heard of this before. So pretty much all past civilizations lived in this region, along the Nile River Delta, because you can farm a lot there, and along the Mediterranean coast, because that's fertile land, and then along the Tigris and Euphrates River. Everything else is desert, and you're going to die. Like die. But you'll live here. Thanks, Julian, for that. All right. So the other name for this is Mesopotamia. So in history class, for example, you're going to hear mainly the word Mesopotamia for this region. also known as the Fertile Crescent. But Mesopotamia is Greek. It means land between the rivers, like talking about the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, for example. All right, and there again, you see what I was talking about, Mesopotamia. So early cities back in the day, like Babylon, Nippur, Uruk, Nineveh, stuff like that, going down over into Israel, Sidon, Jerusalem, all that on that side. All right, quick history, and then we're done. I know this one's a little long. All right, so like I said, we talked about the Fertile Crescent. That's where farms started, so that's where civilization started. Most of the animals that we most of the animals that we have today that are domesticated were domesticated at that time in the Middle East. So cows, goats, sheep, and pigs were all used. Of course, some of them are used to like help on the farm and stuff like that.
Is that spider pig?
That's an ugly pig. So some of them are used to help people on the farm. Others you kill in order to eat. Okay, Julian, thanks for the sound effects. All right. Early civilizations. You'll learn this in world history. You'll learn about the Sumerians. That's your first early civilization. The Babylonians, the Assyrians. You also learn about the Persians and all of that. That conquered this region over a period of a couple thousand years. And obviously the Egyptians. All right, and then your first cities. The one term you do need to know here is you need to know what a ziggurat is. So this is the city of Ur, one of the first cities on earth. This is where Abraham lived from the Bible.
That's not very pretty.
So, well, yeah, it's not pretty now. But this ancient building here, this is at least 4,000 years old. This is called a ziggurat at Ur. This is think of it like town hall. So you went here to pay your taxes. You went here to do all your kind of business stuff. Also, religion was tied in with it too. So they were polytheistic at the time, meaning they believed in many gods, and you would come here each day to make your sacrifices to those gods. Now they believed that those gods didn't really care about humans, but you needed to appease them because if you didn't make them happy, then they would like kill you or something like that. So that's what they did daily. All right, and then the term nomads, you'll need to know what this is, and the term that we use specifically for nomads in the Middle East are called Bedouins, because this is an actual ethnic group of people in the Middle East. They're still around today. They don't have permanent homes. They tend to be semi-nomadic, which means they do move around throughout the year, but it's like certain times of the year. So maybe 4 times in the year, kind of with seasons and stuff, they'll move around to different regions as well. But the nomads go all the way back. These Bedouin groups go all the way back to ancient times. For example, Moses, his wife was a Bedouin. But also the Bedouins are going to be the ones that spread Islam. When Islam first starts, the Bedouins spread this religion because since they're moving around quite a bit, there's a lot of movement. That means ideas move quicker. And so more people are going to be converting over to Islam during that time. But if you want to hang out with Bedouins, you can. You can go on trips with National Geographic and actually go and like hang out with Bedouins for a day if you want to, or longer, and just see what life is like as a semi-nomad. All right, that's the end of that slideshow. I'm also going to post a couple questions for you to answer, just going over this. But yeah, just take basic notes, and we'll get into later what tests and stuff like that may look like later on. Again, let me know if you have any questions. You can email me or text.